I wonder if living in a haunted house is something you kind of get used to after a while. Like those cobwebs in the corner of your home, you eventually learn to ignore. Greetings, my late night listeners, and welcome back to Night Sessions, where we explore the realm of the unexplained, peruse the paranormal, and study the supernatural. I have in front of me a book of ghost stories by Antonio Garces that I'm just going to flip through and see if we find anything interesting. Alright, The House on Apodaca Hill sounds promising. We'll start with a brief introduction from the author. When I consider the stories of the people I have interviewed for this book, I believe that this particular interview with Patricia Camacho will prove to be the most puzzling for the reader because of the overt malevolence and the downright tenacious nature of the ghosts. Camacho presented her story in a calm manner, never giving an emotional reaction to the bizarre atmosphere surrounding what she, her family, and friends experienced at 507 Apodaca Hill. Stranger still, the most difficult to understand is why she remains in this house. Patricia's story begins. The house I am presently renting is over 70 years old. The landlord told me that it used to be a brothel and an illegal gambling hall in the 1920s. The house is divided into two sections, with the bedrooms below ground level and the kitchen and living room above. The upper section was added in the 1950s and solidly constructed of adobe bricks in the Pueblo style, which is very distinctive of Santa Fe. Within the first few days of moving in, about 3 years ago, I had many unusual experiences. One time when I was walking down the stairs to my bedroom, I suddenly felt a hand grab my ankle. Whoever or whatever it was trying to trip me on the stairs. I actually felt a large hand hold tight on my ankle. This sensation disappeared as soon as I struggled free. Several days later, I was not so fortunate. In the following weeks, I had many falls. My legs and arms became bruised as a result. I also experienced nights when I was awakened by the touch of fingers on my face. This happened in the daytime as well. As I was going about my house cleaning, I often felt something brush against my face. At first, I thought it was a bit of a feather or a strand of a spider web that was floating freely in the air and had landed on my face, but a look in the mirror revealed nothing. Soon, the pressure that was brushing against my face increased, and strands of my own hair would be lifted into the air. I felt as if an invisible hand was caressing my face and hair. This continued for several days and nights, but I just shook my head and tried to go about my business. There were also evenings when I was sitting up in bed reading and I noticed movement at the floor of my bed. I saw and felt the blankets slide across my feet, and then I saw the impression of a body sitting down on the bed. The mattress actually depressed with the circular impression of someone's behind on the comforter. As I slowly lifted the blankets to get out of bed, I clearly saw the mattress puff up, returning to its original form. About 2 months ago, I was awakened in the middle of the night by my dog, Miko, barking. As I awoke, I heard the loud pounding noise of someone hitting the wall behind my head. Then the whole bed shook as if someone wanted me out of bed. Miko growled and ran to the door to be let out. Another strange phenomena is the appearance of cold spots in several areas of the house. As I walk from one room to another, I often pass through an area of extreme cold, much colder than the surrounding temperature of the room I happen to be in. It seems as if there is a long vertical tube of frigid air that I pass through without warning until I'm in it. These things happened within the first few months of moving into the house, but as the months passed, things took on a new approach. During the night, I would be awakened by a variety of noises. I would open my eyes and gaze at the darkened ceiling, listening to the sounds of bottles being moved about, and of voices of people deep in conversation. The sounds seemed to be coming from the basement. I was able to detect the source of the sound because the house is not very large and I am familiar with the rooms. Most nights, the voices sounded like a group of people, but on some nights, I was awakened by the harsh voice of a man and the sound of a woman responding loudly. It was difficult to make out what they were saying, even though the language was English. The voices were muffled, but the intensity and the anger were very clear. I heard these voices only at night, but both night and day I heard the sounds of bottles being moved and sometimes broken. Sometimes when I was in one room, like the kitchen, I would hear the sound of a breaking plate or vase coming from another room. At this, Miko would run in circles and bark wildly. Then I would run into the room expecting to see a mess of pottery on the floor. I would find only Miko, and I would have to let her out immediately because of her extreme nervousness. These smashing sounds could occur in any room at any time throughout the house. People who have spent the night with me have reported hearing the sounds of breaking glass and feeling both the extreme cold and web-like fingers brush against their skin. One visitor heard the sound of someone chopping wood at 3 a.m. Other visitors reported seeing framed pictures lift up off the nails and crash on the floor. Articles of clothing move about or disappear, and jewelry or coffee cups disappear at the turn of a head. One day, a friend who was enjoying a hot cup of coffee in the living room rose from her chair and left the room for a moment. When she returned, the cup was gone. To this day, we have not found the cup. Friends and family who have spent the night awake in the morning and reach for their clothing, only to find a shirt or a shoe or a sock missing. My son Chris visited me on 2 occasions, and both times he lost items of clothing. The first time, during the summer, he slept on the couch in the living room for 3 nights. He said that each night he felt a touch on his face or on his leg. On the last night of his stay, he just could not take it anymore. He was awakened by the feeling of being shaken violently and the sound of a man's voice yelling at him, demanding he get up and go to church. Chris was caught off guard by this experience, but got a good look at an older man with a long blonde or gray-colored hair and a mustache. This man was wearing dark clothes and soon disappeared. After that experience, my son returned to his own home. Several months later, Chris came back for another overnight stay. It was Christmas time, so I guess he felt compelled to spend a few nights, ghosts or not. Each morning, he told me of his unusual experiences. On the first 2 nights, he felt extremely cold gusts of air moving past him. and he heard a noise that he described as a bottle rolling on the floor. Not much else had happened, so he began to relax. However, during the last night of his stay, all hell broke loose. I was making my way downstairs to one of the bedrooms, and my son was watching television in the living room with Miko at his side. All of a sudden, we heard a tremendous sound of breaking glass and furniture being thrown about in the bedrooms. Miko began howling and ran to the basement. My son and I remained in our places, motionless. Then Miko's bark changed. She began barking as if someone were attacking her. Before I took one step down the stairs, the dog ran back upstairs and began running in circles. My son said he had had enough and went to a motel. 10 minutes after my son left the house, the sound started up again. As usual, when I went to the bedrooms to investigate, I found nothing broken or disturbed. The only evidence to suggest that someone had been in the rooms was the strong, musky scent of a man's cologne. My friend Jonathan, who visited from Cochiti Pueblo, has heard the now common noises emanating from the basement. He reports hearing a high-pitched woman's voice screaming at someone to leave her alone, and the response of a man's voice, which Jonathan could not clearly make out. Jonathan has also heard the sounds of furniture being thrown against the walls. One night, he was awakened by having his mattress shaken violently. When he opened his eyes and sat up, a loud thumping commenced on the wall near his head. A Native American, Jonathan, wears his hair long. He told me that he felt an invisible hand stroke his hair, and several strands had been lifted up into the air by themselves. At these times, Jonathan has distinctly felt a presence standing beside him. Another friend, Joe from Taos Pueblo, who is a medicine man, visited me and immediately said, "You've got something very bad in this house, Patricia." Joe's son, who was with him, said that he felt covered in a cold chill and felt hands touching him. Joe proceeded to make a small medicine bag for me, which I now carry at all times. Joe also burned sage incense and blessed the house to clear it of its bad spirits. For a few months after that, I had no problems. But not long after Joe's visit, a friend came from California to spend a week with me. One afternoon, she was standing in the living room while I was in the kitchen. We were conversing between the rooms when suddenly she didn't answer. I turned toward her and saw that her eyes were as large and as round as saucers. She stood there, motionless, gazing at me as if she were in shock. Then she yelled, "Oh my gosh, someone is touching me." I went up to her and grabbed her arm. Her skin was ice cold, and her arms were covered in goosebumps. Because of my own experiences, I knew what was happening. I spoke loudly to her, attempting to break through the fright and horror. She responded in a shaky voice. She said that a coldness had approached her and enveloped her, petrifying her senses. Very quickly, the coldness had entered her body, and soon she became hysterical, pleading with me to make the thing leave her alone. I hugged her and tried to settle her down. I told her to extend her hands palm up and held my hands over hers, palms down. Then I concentrated and demanded that whatever was taking over her body leave her. Soon after that, I felt the cold chill creep from my fingertips up my arms and through my body. Seconds later, the coldness left, and we hugged each other again. At times, I have considered seeking the help of a medium, perhaps to perform an exorcism, but I just haven't gotten around to it. A recent incident, however, may have convinced me. I was sitting at the kitchen table, mulling over my thoughts, when suddenly one of the lower cabinet doors swung open and a glass baking dish flew out. I watched as the dish sped across the floor and hit the opposite wall with a tremendous crash, sending shards of glass in all directions. The sight was mentally staggering. I could not imagine how the door had opened or the dish had flown out. Immediately after the dish shattered, Miko began barking and ran into the front door to be let out. I felt it was time to find out more about this house, so I asked my landlord, Hank, if he or his family had experienced anything unusual when they had lived here. He told me his children had used the basement for their bedrooms, and they had placed a small television set on the top of one of the dressers. He said that often the children would run upstairs, shouting that a man had walked into the room and turned off the TV. Then this strange man simply walked into the wall and disappeared. At other times, his children told of being awakened in the middle of the night by skeletons walking around on their beds. Like the strange man, the skeletons also disappeared through the wall. Hank's oldest son corroborated these statements. Hank admits that he too heard loud noises, felt the cold spots throughout the house, and had lost various items. Just 2 nights ago, while sitting in the upstairs living room, Miko started barking, ran to the bedroom, and jumped up on my bed. She continued barking, facing the wall where my pillow is. I saw nothing unusual. Then she stopped barking and just stared at the wall, as though she did not want to miss anything that might happen. Suddenly, she began to bark uncontrollably, and try as I might, I could not stop her. Then she dashed to the living room door and scratched to be let out. She spent the remainder of the night outside, refusing to enter the house. Well, I'm not sure what to do. Considering all that has taken place, I guess people might think I'm crazy to stay at the house. I'll just stay put for the time being. I enjoy the house and the neighborhood, so a ghost or two is not going to make me start looking for a new place anytime soon. The series of paranormal events began soon after she moved in, which was around 2001, according to records. It appears she moved out around 2006, so she definitely stayed in the house long after reporting these events. I wonder if it was these strange occurrences that forced her to move out in the end. What would you have done if you were in Patricia's position? Well, my friend, looks like we're going to call it a night. Thank you for being a listening ear. And until next time, keep your eyes open, my friends. The world is a mysterious place.